I never expected to fall for the dancer I watched every night. A love story beyond our worlds. I will never forget the day everything fell apart. The room was unlike any other, a dimly lit space pulsing with energy. The air was thick with a mix of sweat and anticipation. Shadows flickered like whispers against the walls, breathing life into the dark corners. And then there was her. My breath caught, heart racing as I watched her glide across the stage, an ethereal creature of grace. Her movements were hypnotic, like a spell that summoned my deepest desires. Each leap, each spin ignited something within me, a fire I didn't know existed. Her name was Lila. A name that echoed through the hall even in silence. She danced like the world around her vanished, a siren wrapped in silk and sequins. Her dark hair swirled, captivating every gaze in that crowded room. I was just one face in the sea, yet I felt like she danced solely for me. It was as if her eyes pierced through the clamor, searching for something specific. A connection. A shared heartbeat. I couldn't tell, but my heart was pounding, my hands trembling with anticipation. I barely knew her. Just a smile here, a nod there. But somehow, she wounded me deeply. Friends said I was foolish, entranced by a fantasy. Yet, each night, I returned like a moth to her flame. I shared midnight talks with my best friend Jake, who teased me relentlessly, "You're obsessed, man. It's just a dance. Get a grip." But it was more than just dancing, it was the way she brought the room to life, how people held their breaths, desperate for a single glimpse. She owned the stage. There was an air of mystery about Lila, a hint of something dark lurking beneath her surface. Whispers filled the cracks between our laughter, tales of how she had come from nowhere, sweeping into town with dreams too large for her small frame. Rumors that kept her at a distance, both alluring and unsettling. Every time I caught her gaze, I felt electricity, a longing that sent shivers down my spine. My heart raced, and my mind spun wild thoughts. What did she hide? Was she just a dancer? I needed to know the truth. And yet, as I leaned closer, the world around me faded. I could see it in her eyes, a sadness, a story untold, perhaps a pain that mirrored my own. Then came that fateful night. The music shifted, a haunting melody that wrapped itself around our souls. Lila danced as if lost in a trance, an urgency to flee the past. My pulse quickened, and I took a step closer, mesmerized by the raw emotion that radiated from her. But just as I reached the edge of the crowd, everything changed. A loud crash pierced the air. Gas erupted as the lights flickered violently. The ground shook beneath our feet. My breath stalled in my throat as I turned toward the stage. Lila's expression shifted from ecstasy to sheer horror. She stopped mid-dance, frozen. An unthinkable urgency filled the air, thick with dread. Who was she? Why was she really there? I had to know, yet fear tied my feet to the ground. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. I stood frozen, the crash echoing in my ears like a thunderclap. My heart raced, each beat resounding with questions I was too terrified to articulate. Lila's face, once full of passion and life, turned a ghostly shade, her eyes wide with fear. It felt as if the world around me had shifted, every heartbeat a reminder of the fragility of this moment. As chaos erupted, the crowd surged like a restless sea, desperate for escape. People stumbled over each other, the panic palpable. I could only focus on her, what lay behind that beautiful, troubled facade. The music had died, leaving only a haunting silence filled with confusion and despair. Suddenly, without thinking, I broke free from the throng, my feet carrying me toward the stage, while everyone else fled. I pushed through the chaos, determined. Something deep inside urged me to reach her, to reassure her, to discover the truth lurking in her shadowed eyes. When I finally reached the edge of the stage, I was met with the terrified gaze of a woman I hardly knew but felt inexplicably tied to. "Lila!" I called out, my voice barely piercing through the din. She turned her head slowly, tears gathering at the corners of her eyes, almost as if she recognized the weight of our shared moment. "Stay back!" she shouted, but her voice trembled, revealing a crack beneath her bravado. "Are you okay?" I was breathless, burdened by the urgency in her frightened expression. "What happened? Did someone I have to go?" she interrupted, her body shifting nervously. With a swift movement, she spun away from me, her graceful form veiled in a sudden cloud of panic. I watched, heart pounding, as she disappeared behind the curtain. Shadows swallowed her whole, leaving me grasping at the emptiness where she had been. For a moment, I was paralyzed, frozen in disbelief. The crowd around me began to disperse, voices buzzing with rumors and speculation. Someone had shouted that it was an accident, a malfunction with the equipment. But I knew in my gut that something more sinister loomed in the background. The sorrow in Lila's eyes told a different story, one that begged to be uncovered. I turned to find my friend Jake, who had somehow navigated the chaos to stand beside me. His face was a mix of shock and concern. "What just happened?" he asked, looking toward where Lila had vanished. "I don't know, but she's in trouble," I replied, feeling the weight of my words scoop low in my gut. "There's something about her, something she's not telling me." "We should leave, man," Jake said, tugging at my arm. "Let's get out of here," but I couldn't. I felt anchored to this moment, to her fear and her magic. "What if something happened to her?" I whispered, unwilling to turn my back. Before Jake could respond, a flicker of light caught my attention. From behind the curtain, a shadow moved, darting across the stage. I squinted, trying to make out the figure. My heart leaped. Was it Lila? No, it wasn't. Another dancer appeared, moving with a frantic urgency, as if she too was seeking to escape. I couldn't tell if it was an ally or another heartache, but there was something about her presence that pulled at me. She threw a glance my way, something searching and desperate in her bright eyes. "Help her." The words fell from my lips before I realized I was speaking. She hesitated, her brows knitting together in confusion. "What?" "Lila. She might be in danger," I shouted, feeling a surge of desperation. How could she not understand? With a decisive nod, the other dancer turned toward the back of the stage. I held my breath, partly out of hope and partly out of fear. The backstage area was a labyrinth, dark and foreboding, a snug cover for secrets waiting to be uncovered. Each heartbeat echoed in my ears, each whisper of anticipation fueling my determination. But as I stepped forward, Jake gripped my arm tightly. "We have to go. This is too dangerous." "No." I pulled away from him, my eyes wide with a mixture of defiance and fear. "I can't stand here while she's out there alone." In that moment, I understood that my journey was intertwined with Lila's, a thread that wove through the fabric of our lives. I took a breath and moved toward the darkness, each step a leap into the unknown. Shadows cloaked me as I entered the backstage area, where silence reigned. And then there was a sound, a muffled cry. My heart dropped, the urgency morphing into dread, as I realized my fears were not unfounded. I approached the source, bracing myself for whatever truth awaited me. Each footfall felt heavy, pulling me closer to a revelation I both craved and feared. In that moment, In a haze of anticipation and anxiety, I found myself torn between the thrill of hope and the chilling grasp of dread, knowing something awaited me that would change everything. And then I saw them. Lila, backed into a corner, her eyes wide, facing off against a man who was looming over her like a storm cloud threatening to burst. The expression on her face was pure terror, and for the first time, I understood the danger behind the beauty. "Lila!" I shouted, the sound of my voice barely breaking through the chaos around us. In that instant, everything hung in the balance, and I realized I had stepped into a nightmare I couldn't escape. The man turned abruptly at the sound of my voice, the anger in his eyes boiling to the surface like a volcano threatening to erupt. I could see every muscle tense in his frame, and for a moment, the world around us blurred into a pulsing, throbbing silence as I confronted the fear gripping me. Lila's eyes darted toward mine, a blend of confusion and desperation etched into her features. "Get away from her!" I called out, feeling a fierce heat rise in my chest. The man's lips curled into a twisted smile, mocking my interference. "Or what?" he challenged, his voice dripping with a menace that sent chills down my spine. "You'll scare me off with your bravado." Ignoring the tremor in my hands, I stepped forward, instinctively placing myself between Lila and danger, though my heartbeat echoed a protest. "You need to leave her alone. She's done nothing to you wrong," he said, his gaze pinned on Lila, the malice in his tone vibrating with an unsettling familiarity. "She's everything to me. And that, my friend, is a mistake she can't afford to make again." The word "again" felt like a dagger slicing through the air, and I could see the horror wash over Lila's face. With a quick glance, she reached out, her trembling fingers brushing against my arm, a silent plea connection charged with so much unspoken history. "Please, just go," she whispered, her voice barely above the sound of my own escalating fears. "You don't know what he's capable of, but I can't just leave you here," I protested, my heart surging with the raw intensity of the moment. Suddenly, I heard footsteps nearing. We weren't alone in this secluded pocket of the backstage darkness. A familiar figure emerged from the shadows, and recognition shot through me like a bolt of electricity. It was the dancer who had hesitated before, the one I had seen earlier. In my frantic urge to help, she had a fierce look of determination as she approached, but the moment she caught sight of the man threatening Lila, her expression shifted to one of horror. "No. Not again!" she cried, rushing to Lila's side, standing firm beside me despite the overwhelming odds. "Let her go. You have no right to do this." The man twisted his lips into a snarl, his focus split between us. "You think you can save her? You're far too late." In that moment, I could see Lila's resolve faltering, the weight of her fear pressing down on her. "Stop it!" she yelled at him, her voice gaining strength, rising above the mayhem. "I won't let you control me anymore." The intensity in the air thickened, electric and unyielding, creating a fracture in our resolve standoff. The man's eyes flared with rage, and for a moment, I feared for Lila's safety, and the last echo of doubt bit into my heart. Could I protect her? Was this intuitive connection I felt merely a fantasy spun from fragile threads? In a split second, he lashed out toward Lila, but it wasn't her he struck. The dancer beside me was like a fierce guardian, stepping in front of her and taking the brunt of the blow, a shockwave of power that sent her sprawling to the ground as if time was slipping away from us all. "Don't!" "No!" I shouted, adrenaline surging through my veins. I bolted forward, but Lila's hand shot out, grasping my wrist tightly, her eyes pleading with a mix of sorrow and bravery. "Stay back. You can't help me by getting hurt, too," she gasped, her voice filled with urgency. In that moment, I felt my heart crack open, a wellspring of emotions pouring out. I had never known a purpose that felt so primal, so raw, yet here I was, caught in this whirlwind, drowning in fear and yet consumed by a desperate need to protect the one person who made the darkness seem bearable. But before I could respond, the man lunged at me. I braced myself, focusing on the power of my resolve. It was now or never. My hands clenched into fists, and as chaos threatened to devour me, I suddenly remembered the dancer's struggle and her bravery. "Run, Lila!" I shouted, "Get out of here," and as she turned to flee, her gaze locked with mine, a shard of hope ignited in the depths of my despair. But then, a shrill sound pierced through the air, a scream echoing from the depths of the darkness, making my heart lurch. All at once, everything shifted. The world around us fragmented like glass shattering upon impact, and in that fractured moment, Lila's scream transformed into something more horrific than I could have ever imagined. "Wait!" I could barely manage to call out, just as the realization of what awaited us began to sink in, the profound truth that the nightmare was only just beginning. And as shadows lurked, swirling with secrets and threats unknown, I felt the solid ground beneath my feet tremble, the unfurling chaos unraveling, a nightmare that stretched far beyond this moment. The backstage was alive with chaos, the air thick with tension and the potent perfume of panic. Even as I lost sight of Lila, the echo of her desperate scream reverberated in my ears, fueling a sense of urgency that ignited every nerve in my body. I turned my focus back to the man, whose face was twisted and feral, each breath heavy with the weight of a hidden malevolence. "Where did she go?" I demanded, my voice saturated with the raw intensity of my fear. The dancer lay crumpled at my feet, her eyes fluttering as she attempted to push herself off the ground. Seeing her struggle, a flicker of empathy ignited within me. I forced myself to kneel beside her, my heart aching for the strength she had shown just moments before. "Stay with me," I murmured, gently grasping her shoulders. "You're going to be okay." I didn't know if it was the truth, but I needed to believe it for her sake and for my own. She nodded weakly, her gaze still searching, as if she too had felt the tremors of fear that held me captive. "Lila," she managed to say, her voice breaking. The world around us twisted, but I knew we had to keep moving. I scanned the room, half expecting Lila to reappear like a ghost from the shadows, her spirit too powerful to extinguish. Instead, the darkness felt heavier, a suffocating shroud whispering secrets of despair. Suddenly, the man lunged forward. I pushed the dancer aside, the instinct to protect overtaking me again as I felt the air shift, the tension taut, like a bowstring ready to snap. "You're done," I declared, my throat tight with dread. "Am I?" he said, chuckling darkly as he stepped closer, shadows dancing across his features. "You think you can stand against me? You don't know what you're meddling with. Let her go." I spat, my rage bubbling over like molten lava. In the deep recesses of my mind, memories began to unfurl, flashes of joy, laughter, moments shared with Lila. I could practically see her smile, the way it lit up her features like sunlight breaking through a storm. But then doubt seeped in, insidious and cold, like an icy claw gripping my heart. What if I failed her? What if the darkness consumed us both? A small spark of defiance ignited within me, stoking the fire of my resolve. With a swift motion, I sidestepped the man's next move and lunged toward the fading silhouette of the dancer. If Lila was in peril, I would protect the ones who still had a chance to escape. "Run!" I shouted to the dancer as I caught her arm and pulled her to her feet. Together, we stumbled away from the chaos, our hearts hammering in sync, a shared understanding binding us as tightly as our fear. "Where's Lila?" she cried, her tone thick with panic as we navigated the labyrinth of backstage corners, each turn a reminder of how easily we could lose our way. "I don't know," I yelled back, but determination surged through me, a lifeline I clung to amidst the storm. "We can't stop. We have to find her." In desperate pursuit, we rushed toward the nearest exit, the clamor of chaos fading behind us. As we reached the heavy double doors, the dancer hesitated, her breath coming in ragged gasps. "What if he's waiting outside?" Those words sliced through me, an acute realization dawning. I had not just been trying to save Lila. I had been running from my own demons, my fears manifesting in the shadows I had fought so hard to escape. "We can't let him win," I whispered, more to myself than to her. The weight of the moment pressed down, yet I clung to that fragile flicker of hope. Suddenly, a crashing sound reverberated through the walls, a raw panic surging to life. I glanced back, and my stomach dropped. The man was not far behind, his presence an oppressive darkness threatening to consume us once again. Just then, my phone buzzed in my pocket, a reminder of the outside world, a tether to what lay beyond the chaos. I fumbled for it, relief washing over me as I saw Lila's name flash across the screen. But the moment shattered as the man's sinister laughter echoed through the corridor, venomous and chilling. Where are you going? Do you really think you can run from me? I looked into the dancer's eyes, fear mingling with determination. We have to go. Now. As we pushed through the door and emerged into the night, the air filled with the scent of rain and the distant twinkling of city lights. It was a stark contrast to the darkness we'd just escaped, but the sense of safety was fleeting. A sudden realization hit me harder than the cold wind against my skin. Lila was still out there. Listen, I said, pulling the dancer close. We have to find her. We will find her. My voice trembled, but I drew strength from her steady gaze. We can't afford to lose her to whatever darkness he's entangled her in. Yet as I turned to face the alleyway we had just exited, my heart sank. Lila's frantic scream echoed once more, a desperate cry for help that ignited a primal instinct within me to defend my heart. And then, from the shadowy depths of the night, a new figure emerged, one I never expected to see again. My heart raced as recognition washed over me, pulling me into a whirlwind of confusion and hope. It was a face I had seen before in my dreams, a connection buried deep in the recesses of my soul. Why are you here? I whispered, the weight of their presence threatening to break me anew. Time paused, suspended in an ethereal tension, leaving me on the precipice of hope and despair, knowing that this moment would forever change the course of our fight against the encroaching darkness. The night air crackled with tension as the figure stepped closer, eyes glinting in the silvery glow of streetlights. You shouldn't be here, I whispered, the words escaping my lips like a startled breath. Memories tangled with a rush of emotions, flooding back all the late-night rehearsals, the unspoken longing, the way she moved with a grace that seemed otherworldly. There was Lila, and then there was another story, hers, untouched by the chaos surrounding us now. Maybe I'm here to help, the dancer Savannah said softly, her voice steady despite the storm brewing within me. But before I could respond, a fresh wave of urgency swept through the alley, and we were all too aware of the darkness looming behind us. Have you seen Lila? I asked, desperation creeping back into my voice. The shadows shifted, and memories of her laughter echoed ominously. My heart clenched with the weight of my own insecurities, doubts dancing in my mind like specters keeping me from fully believing in the strength I needed to master. Savannah exchanged a glance with me, her empathy disarming. She might be hiding. We need to find her before he does. There was an undeniable resilience in her gaze, a testament to her own battles fought and scars worn. In that moment, my instinct to protect surged anew, wrapped tightly around the fragile hope ignited by her words. Then let's move, I urged, but as we turned, the echo of footsteps grew louder behind us. The air shifted, thickening with danger. My thoughts flitted back to the dancer crumpled on the ground moments ago, the fierce determination we had shared urging me forward. If I could find Lila, perhaps we could draw strength from her spirit once more. The three of us pressed on through the twisting alleys of the city, breaths mingling with the cold, damp air. The tense quiet around us was occasionally shattered by distant sirens, a haunting reminder that our struggle was skirting the edge of something far darker. Yet Savannah walked beside me, her presence a soothing balm to the chaos inside me. Each shared glance, each silent moment fueled a bond one had never expected to form in the midst of such terror. We moved through the heart of night, ever aware of shadows that darted at the corners of our vision. With every step came marred memories of the shows where Lila had poured herself into every performance, a stark reminder of what we risked losing. She deserves to be rescued, I said, as if saying the truth aloud could somehow conjure her back to us. Finally, we reached an isolated section by the docks, dark water lapping against wooden piers, the air thick with the briny scent of the sea. Savannah's eyes widened, as if she understood the gravity of this place better than I did. "He might have her here," she murmured, dread lacing her words. "Then we can't waste any more time." I stepped onto the shaky dock, a sense of foreboding pressing down on me heavier than ever. The wind picked up, rustling through the few remaining leaves clinging to life around us. "Lila!" I shouted. Panic rushed against my throat, each syllable a plea to the night. "Listen." Savannah beckoned me, instinctively raising her hand to shush me as she scanned the dilapidated buildings lining the docks. "Do you hear that?" Faintly, there was a chorus of muffled cries, a semblance of hope echoing in the stillness, but I could feel the heaviness in our hearts pulling us back toward that relentless fear. Then, just as we began to strategize our next steps, a chilling cry pierced the air. "Help! Someone help me, Lila!" I gasped, adrenaline surging as I felt an invisible string tugging at my heart. I turned to Savannah, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and determination. Without another moment's hesitation, I dashed toward the sound, driven by the rhythm of my own hammering heart. As we neared a decrepit warehouse, shadows flitted and danced around, and I felt the fold of dread wrap tighter around my chest. "Stay close," I ordered, though the raw fear clawing at my insides nearly extinguished the light of my resolve. Then, as if fumbled fate had conspired to hold us in this moment, the door flew open at the far end of the building. An ominous figure, one I had begun to dread, stepped into view. It was him, the man from before, his smile a sickening mask of triumph. "Looking for someone?" he taunted, an echo of darkness embodied. My heart sank as I realized that we had fallen right into his trap. Without thinking, I surged forward, instinctively putting myself in front of Savannah, prepared to fight for what little hope we had left. "You won't have her," I shouted, the conviction laced in my words echoing through the silence of that forsaken place. His laughter rang out, a sinister sound that seemed to sap the very air from my lungs. "Oh, but she's mine for the taking," he jeered, and in that instant, the world around me receded, the focus sharpening on the horrifying truth of what was about to unfold. I spun to Savannah, determination boiling beneath my skin, but as I prepared to make a last stand, a revelation crashed through me like a dark wave. Savannah had seen fear before, hadn't she? The shadows that cradled our reality nestled secrets deeper than those of mere dancers hiding from their pasts. "Savannah, tell me the truth. What do you know?" Before she could respond, we were thrown further into chaos, the ground trembling beneath us. The sound of shattering glass echoed from somewhere deeper in the warehouse. Lila's scream resonated in my ears once again, strong, vivid, unforgettable, and just like that, the pieces I had fought to hold together teetered on the brink of collapse. No. "We find her now," I cried, but then, as if the universe had other plans, bewilderment gripped the space around us with a breathless finality. The place that had once been a safeguard would become a forgotten tale of losses yet to come, and so, we charged into the maw of darkness, holding tightly to hope while the specter of despair lurked just behind, a haunting reminder that sometimes the ones we thought we knew best carry secrets too heavy to bear. The air was thick with uncertainty as we stumbled deeper into the warehouse, every step echoing not just with our shoes but with the unspoken fears that clawed at my heart. Shadows cascaded over the crumbling walls, and the flickering lights overhead seemed to mock our bravery as they danced between light and darkness, just as Lila's spirit had so often swayed between the two. "Stay close," I urged again, a mantra that felt more desperate with each breath I took. Savannah, her brow furrowed in concentration, nodded silently, and I was grateful for her presence. Together, in this surreal limbo of dread, she was my tether, reminding me with every synchronized step that I wasn't alone. "Do you really think Lila's here?" Savannah whispered, her voice barely cutting through the oppressive silence. I could see the way uncertainty played across her face, and I felt it mirror my own. But there was a piece of me that wouldn't allow myself to yield to doubt. She has to be, I replied, though my voice trembled slightly. This is where he comes. It makes sense. What I didn't say, what gripped my heart like a vice, was the knowing presence that whispered she might not be. With each passing moment, I felt myself unraveling, the very fabric of my hope fraying in the face of the greater world pressing down on us. Suddenly, the echo of shuffling feet reached our ears, and we exchanged a glance filled with urgency. This way. I gestured toward a corridor leading deeper into the warehouse, its darkness more inviting than the horrors lurking behind us. We slipped inside, hoping to gain an advantage, hoping to find the heart of the fear that tethered us here. The stench of dampness mixed with something more acrid hung in the air, but it was the violent shouts from somewhere close that propelled us forward. My heart raced as the sound enveloped us, a cacophony of despair swirling like a storm. Lila. I called out again, my own voice tinged with a mix of desperation and determination. Another cry echoed, this one sharper, more distinct. It was as if the walls themselves were closing in, trapping the sound and infusing it with the essence of dread. We have to hurry, Savannah urged, and I felt her hand grip mine as we both plunged further into the belly of the beast. Every moment stretched unbearably as we followed the sounds cutting through the heavy breaths and the crunch of debris beneath our feet. Before I knew it, we were standing at an unsteady door, the noise now a din of panic crashing against my eardrums. I pushed it open and stumbled inside. The sight before us shattered my resolve. A makeshift holding cell lay exposed in the bare room, and there, crumpled on the ground, was Lila. My breath caught in my throat, a painful knot tightening as I took in her fragile form. Lila! I gasped, rushing forward, but I was met with a bone-chilling realization. A hooded figure stood looming over her, arms crossed with a menacing calmness. What a lovely reunion, he sneered, amusement flickering in his eyes, a predatory glint that sent a fresh wave of fear coursing through me. With a surge of adrenaline, Savannah stepped forward, her voice unwavering despite the terror dripping from the situation. Let her go. She's not yours. For the first time, the man's smile faltered, replaced by a thin, dark line. You think you have the power to change things? He questioned, dismissive, and yet I could feel the way his gaze shone with malice. I could see that he had underestimated us. Maybe not now, I spat, clenching my fists, my heart thunderous in my chest. But you don't own her. In a flicker of movement, he turned back to Lila, who had raised her head, her eyes clouded with confusion but lit with the fire of defiance I had once respected as part of her spirit. I'm not afraid of you, she shouted, every syllable punctuated by the chills running through my veins. It ignited something in me, and the strength began to swell. We were not alone in this fight. Suddenly, the door behind us swung open, and a figure burst in a shadow from the past, yet one I had never expected to see. Here. What's going on? Came a voice, familiar and unexpected. Caden. I breathed, bewilderment coursing through me, for he was meant to be far from here, lost in his own battles. But there he stood, eyes wide with confusion, and the very fabric of what I understood to be real began to unravel. Get out of here, I shouted, fear for him clawing at my throat. But as he took a step forward, the man's demeanor shifted, a darkness edged his features, and in that next heartbeat, all hell seemed primed to break loose. Just as he lunged for Lila, the room erupted into chaos. I lunged after him, but his movements were too swift, too calculated. The world spun, my heart racing as I lost my grip on everything I'd fought for. Lila! I screamed again, but as the chaos ensued and shadows engulfed us, I heard a horrid crack and gasps filled the air like echoes of a nightmare. Lila's scream entwined itself with mine, and the last thing I saw as the world blurred was Caden, arms outstretched, voices rising, hope turning to despair in a single, shattering moment. And then, darkness swallowed us whole, uncertainty, grief, and the weight of consequence crashing down like a deluge, drowning out every flicker of hope we had clung to. The world slowly returned from the depths of darkness, but not without a flood of confusion. The nightmare had momentarily lifted, revealing the menacing warehouse in sharp relief, except now the oppressive silence was filled with heavy groans and muffled cries. I blinked into the dim light, desperately searching for familiar faces, yet feeling a wave of hopelessness wash over me. Lila was gone. Where are you? I rasped, my voice raw against the jagged edges of my fear. I tried to rise, but a piercing pain shot through my ribs, and I gritted my teeth, constraining a cry. Savannah's anguished face swam into view, tears streaking her dirt-smudged cheeks. Lila! She shouted, her terrified eyes darting around as if our frantic calls could somehow summon her back from wherever she had vanished. She was right here, I swear. Where did they take her? The echoes of our footsteps faded, absorbed by the stillness, and an eerie emptiness gnawed at the edges of my resolve. Just moments ago, we had faced the fiend, stood unified in our stand against him, and now we were scattered, lost among the remnants of our courage, split apart by darkness. Caden! I shouted, remembering the moment he stepped into view, the breath of relief crashing into sheer panic. Where had he gotten to? With a struggle, I managed to push myself upright, teeth clenched against the sharp pangs of pain coursing through my body. Caden! Savannah joined in, her voice ringing through the desolate space, but even the air felt heavy with despair. It was as if an unseen force conspired against us, swallowing our hopes whole. As the dim light flickered and shadows danced around us, a low sound echoed through the corridor, an unholy rattle followed by a sigh of trouble. They're not gone far, Savannah whispered, the tremor in her voice revealing her unyielding fear. Let's move, I said, forcing myself into a staggered step, unwilling to dwell on the fear that churned in my gut. We wouldn't find Lila in this graveyard of shadows. We could not afford to lose the fire that had ignited with her rebellion, nor the last flicker of hope sparking within us. We limped back through the remnants of the chaos, weaving around debris and the remnants of broken crates as dread tightened its grip. Somewhere in the distance came the murmur of voices, familiar ones that sent jolts of urgency through me. This way, I urged, steering Savannah toward the sound, willing it to be more than a ghost of our imagination. As we turned the corner, I nearly stumbled upon Callum, face bruised but alive, surrounded by other familiar faces, our companions, our anchors. The moment I locked eyes with him, hope flared to life. Where's Caden? He came in after us, I demanded, my heart pounding. Callum met my gaze with a mix of dread and resolve. He stepped in to help Lila. The last I saw, he followed the man. But he doesn't know where they've taken her, Savannah interrupted, panic creeping into her voice, tinged with frustration. Then we need to find them, I said, my heart racing outrageously. We regroup, and we continue our search. But as we prepared to move forward, a shadow breached the dim light around us. A figure I couldn't discern slipped into view, lingering at the edge of our fragile circle. My breath caught as the familiar features emerged from obscurity. Emma, her expression strained, fury simmering beneath the surface. I know where they've taken her, she burst out, her voice charged with urgency. But it won't be easy, we need to hurry. I took a step forward, hope watering the roots of despair blooming within. Then tell us, I urged. We can't wait. Without hesitation, she divulged hurried instructions on navigating the dark underbelly of the warehouse, a path fraught with peril, potential traps, and secrets we might not be ready to face. Just as the memory of hope promised us some solace that day, crumpled despair poured in when a muffled thud echoed closer, casting shadows over our newfound purpose. I swallowed hard. Get ready, I whispered, the weight of preparation pressing on my chest. We don't have time to lose. And with that, we plunged back into the unknown, a ragtag assembly of lost souls banding together once more in pursuit of a flickering light. But as we threaded our way deeper into the labyrinth of decay and uncertainty, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was trailing news, an uninvited guest lurking just beyond the edge of our awareness. And then the echo of my heart broke with a chilling realization, a voice whispering a truth I dared not confront. "Caden." I choked out, but there was no response. Only shadows closing in, darkness swallowing our cries. We moved faster, urgency gripping us until I staggered, and in that split second, a vision in the corner of my eye caught my attention, a figure in a familiar coat slipping away, leaving an intricate hint of where Lila might be. But in the bustling chaos of fear, darkness lunged once more, and I was left with more questions than answers. Who was betraying us now? Would we be able to confront the darkness, or would it ensnare us all? Together, we faced this new challenge at the heart of our unraveling adventure, but would we emerge as saviors, or would folly be the only sanctuary we could find? The smell of damp concrete enveloped us as we pressed onwards, the light from our phone screens flickering like fragile fireflies in a darkened forest. Each step brought with it a cacophony of emotions. Fear battled with the flicker of hope that had ignited within me upon hearing Emma's revelation. But the deeper we went, the heavier the atmosphere became, wrapping around us like a suffocating shroud. Savannah's breathing was quick, her gaze darting incessantly, constantly searching for some sign of comfort in our makeshift world. Callum had taken to observing our surroundings, ever the vigilant protector. Even Emma, usually so confident, wore a mask of anxiety, her fingers twitching as though she could barely contain the urge to fidget. "They've got to be nearby," she assured us, though her voice wavered. "We just need to follow this path. Keep your heads down and don't make noise." The muffled sounds of distant chaos pulsed like a heartbeat, relentless and unyielding. Every thud echoed through the corridor, reminding us of our own fragile mortality. I felt the weight of our mission tethered tightly to my heart, threading together our fates. Lila's absence felt like an open wound, raw and pulsing with desperation. Suddenly, a sounder whisper carried on the stale air stopped me in my tracks. "You hear that?" I said, raising a finger to my lips. We halted, exchanging worried looks as the whisper grew clearer, rising above the din, seemingly drawing nearer. "Help, please." My heart plummeted at the sound of that distinct voice. "It's her. Lila." I blurted, instinctively moving towards it, but Emma grabbed my arm, her grip fierce with caution. "Wait. It could be a trap." A trap. The thought clawed at the edges of my resolve, but I wouldn't let fear suffocate my determination. "We can't just leave her. We have to try," I argued, the urgency swelling in my chest like a tide, rising and rising. Emma's eyes softened, and, gritting her teeth, she nodded reluctantly. "All right, but be careful, stay low and stick close." We crept forward cautiously, shadows skirting along the walls as if we were intruders in a world that had long ago forgotten the warmth of light. The whisper grew in urgency, leading us through maze-like corridors that twisted deceptively, yet I could almost feel Lila's spirit guiding us through that door. Callum pointed, his voice barely above a whisper. My heart raced, it was as if time had clutched at my chest, rendering the moment unbearably slow. Together, we nudged the door open, the creaking sound cutting through the silence like a knife. The sight that unfurled before us was haunting. Lila was tied to a chair, her fierce spirit dimmed by the shadows encroaching around her. Cold tendrils of fear coiled in my stomach, but I forced them down as I approached Lila. I breathed, rushing to her side. "Get away!" she shouted, her eyes narrowing in a mixture of defiance and fear. "It's a trap." Before I could process her warning, a figure thrust itself from the shadows, and I barely had time to react before the coldness of steel met my skin. A nifty sinister glint in the dim light. My breath hitched, caught in the vice of impending dread. "Do not move," came the drawl of a voice, all too familiar. A chill cascaded down my spine as I faced the reality of betrayal embodied in that silhouette. Caden. I gasped, disbelief mingling with terror. He stood before us, eyes darkened by a mixture of confusion and desperation, uncertainty flickering in what had once been loyal. Caden, please. I pleaded, the battle within him evident. This isn't, you don't do this. As his grip tightened around the handle of the knife, the atmosphere thickened with tension. They made me, he choked out, his voice breaking as if he were fighting against some unseen force. I didn't want to, but too didn't have a choice. Caden, please. Lila cried out, her voice laced with a haunting vulnerability that settled over me like a shroud. You are stronger than this. The tremor in his hand betrayed him, a flicker of the boy I once knew emerging from the shadows of his despair. For one breath-stealing moment, the world hung suspended, the weight of our destinies teetering on that precipice, but just as it seemed we might pull him back from the edge, an explosion of chaos erupted. Gunshots rang out, sending splinters of wood flying like arrows, and the cacophony of screams overwhelmed us. Run! Emma screamed, and instinct took over, propelling us back into the shadows even as my heart wrenched at what we were leaving behind. Caden was swallowed by the dark, the last flicker of his face etched with layers of conflict. Regret licked at my wounds, but there was no time to dwell on that heartache. We surged forward, adrenaline pumping through our veins, propelled by the haunting knowledge that we had to save not only Lila but Caden too. But as we fled from the crumbling maze, another cold realization pressed against my chest. What if we could save neither? As the echoes of chaos grew distant, a troubling thought wrapped around my mind. Had Caden truly been lost to us, swallowed wholeheartedly by the darkness that now threatened to consume us all? Would our desperate attempts at rescue only tether us to deeper despair? The path forward shimmered with uncertainty, and the darkness loomed larger than ever, relentless in its pursuit. The sharp echoes of gunfire faded into the distance as we stumbled through the labyrinth of debris that surrounded us, our lungs burning with exertion and fear. Emma, Callum, and I pushed on, a fragile string connecting us through shared anxiety. The labyrinth around us was alive with shadows, and each flicker of light hastened the relentless pounding in my chest. Are you okay? I glanced back at Lila, whose face was pale but determined. She nodded, but the tremor in her chin betrayed the facade of strength she was trying to uphold. We had barely escaped from the jaws of chaos, but the wounds left in that fleeting encounter were greater than any physical scars. Savannah turned to us, her eyes wide. What do we do now? We can't just leave him, we have to go back. We can't. Not now, Callum interjected, his voice steady but tinged with heartache. Not until we find safety. We'll regroup, and then we'll figure out how to help him. We can't risk all our lives right now. I could see the conflict brewing within Savannah, her heart heavy with the weight of uncertainty. But we can't just abandon him. He's not the Caden we knew anymore, I whispered, feeling the sting in my own heart as the words escaped. The truth clawed at me, yet it felt like a freshly opened wound. Listen, Lila spoke softly, her eyes narrowing thoughtfully. We can find a way to reach him. We just need time to be strategic. Her voice caught, and I could see the flicker of hope ignite like a candle in her chest. But first, we need to find a place to hide. The corridors twisted through the building like a half-remembered dream, but soon our exhausting escape led us to a disused basement filled with the remnants of forgotten lives, scattered furniture, expired newspapers, and peeling paint that whispered stories of those who had once walked here. We hurried inside and pressed our backs against the damp walls, drawing the shadows closer around us. Relief washed over us momentarily, but the dim light of hope was quickly overwhelmed by the anguish still hanging in our hearts. As we settled into a tense silence, I took a moment to observe my friends. Their faces were etched with fatigue, each one marred by the reality of our situation. I felt my spirit strained, stretched thin like a tightrope, unease pulling in my stomach like lead. Why would he do this? Savannah grumbled, her voice hoarse as it broke the silence. He was supposed to be on our side. He was our friend. Something changed, Emma spoke softly, her brow furrowing. This isn't the Caden we knew. He wouldn't hurt us without a reason. Lila wrapped her arms around her knees, staring pensively at the floor. It's not just about him. There's something much larger at play here, something we don't understand. That notion loomed heavy in the air, threatening to encapsulate every hope we'd clung to. Then how do we fix it? I asked, desperation creeping into my tone. The echo of Caden's knife glinting in the darkness haunted me, and I could still feel the ghostly brush of it against my skin. By figuring out what's going on, Emma said carefully, her gaze turning resolute. We gather information, find out who's pulling the strings, and then we find Caden. We need to save him. Just as a flicker of understanding began to illuminate our darkness, the world outside erupted once more. Helicopters hovered ominously overhead, their lights cutting through the night like fiery swords. We huddled closer, sharing warmth as fear trickled back into our veins. This has to be bigger than we thought, Savannah whispered, her eyes wide, reflecting the shifting shadows. We have to trust each other to stay alive, and we need to rely on our instincts. Everyone nodded, the vibrations of our collective strength coursing through the dim remnants of our refuge. It wasn't a promise of safety, but perhaps it was enough to hold the flickering hope in place. We spent minutes, maybe hours, sinking deeper into desperate conversations about what Caden might have seen, what power could see someone so completely. Each idea morphed into something darker, the woods of conspiracy wrapping themselves around our minds like a suffocating vine. Suddenly, Lila stood up, a flame ignited within her. If we're going to get through this, we need allies. We can't be afraid to ask for help, she asserted, her voice growing in strength. Her eyes sparkled with determination as she turned into the shadows, and before any of us could react, she was already halfway out the door. Lila! I shouted, panic rising in my throat. But it was too late. She had slipped away into the night, the silent promise of her departure hanging heavy in the air. The anxious fight within me reached a boiling point, desperation and urgency spiraling into a wild storm. We can't just leave her. What if this is a mistake? Callum murmured, his voice fragile as we clung to each other, a tangle of fear and confusion as shadows swirled around us. As we stood there, uncertainty clinging to us like a second skin, I felt a wave crash within me, a long-buried instinct rising to the surface like a phoenix emerging from ash. I knew I had to go after her. Everyone stay here, I commanded, a futile attempt to sound resolute even as fear clawed at my resolve. I'll find her. I won't let her face whatever darkness is out there alone. As I stepped into the darkness, the echo of uncertainty rang in my ears, intertwining with the weight of my responsibility. The air outside was thick, every rustle of leaves whispering warnings against my resolve, but what loomed larger than fear was a burgeoning realization pulsating through my veins. I couldn't save Lila, and I couldn't save Caden, not unless I faced my own fears first. And so with every determined step, I felt the world around me spiral further into darkness, twisting promises of hope and despair in perfect unison. In the distance, the faint sound of a dancer's music floated through the air, a hauntingly beautiful melody, beckoning me forward, yet warning me of the impending storm. I had no way of knowing whether I would reach her in time or if this dark path would lead me to despair, but one thing was clear, in this new reality, falling for hope could mean the difference between survival and oblivion. I found myself in the unfamiliar streets, shrouded in darkness where whispers of fear danced on the edges of silence. The pounding of my heart was relentless, matching the rhythm of the distant music that called to me, a melody both haunting and beautiful. It resonated through the night like a promise, urging me to find Lila, yet the air felt charged with unspoken danger. Twisting alleys loomed like labyrinths, fragments of our shared past haunting each corner. Unwavering determination clawed at my insides. I had to reach her. As I ran, my thoughts spiraled back to the night that started everything, a night cloaked in adventure, magic, and undeniable connection. Lila's laughter, her light, had pulled me in like gravity. The very notion of losing her now fueled my urgency, but the darkness encroaching on my journey threatened to swallow me whole. Shadows danced just out of sight, figures blending into the gloom, reminding me of the peril that lingered at the edge of our world. My mind flashed with memories of Caden and the chaos that had ensued, the moment that had severed our lives into two distinct realities. Before and after. I stumbled into an open area, the flickering lanterns casting eerie glimpses of what lay ahead. And then I heard a pained cry that echoed through the silence, piercing straight to my core. "Lila!" I shouted, propelled by instinct, the fear coating my tongue with ash. My thoughts raced, entwined with each desperate breath. Was I too late? The heart of the music pulsed deep within the alley beyond, a siren call pulling me toward it with an urgency that quickened my pulse. I dashed forward, determination blazing in my chest. The sound was sweet yet distorted, a melody tinged with sorrow, a desperate entreaty from the woman who had become the center of my universe. Closer now, I could see flickers of shadow and light colliding like 1,000 emotions fighting to escape. I rounded a corner and burst into the clearing. It felt surreal, like a scene plucked from a dream. There she was, standing beneath a lone streetlight, lost in a dance that blended agony with hope. The rhythm flowed through her, intricate and beautifully raw, a desperate expression of her spirit swirling with longing, intertwined with strife. My heart squeezed painfully as I realized that laughter had transformed into something more profound enough to crush the very breath from my lungs. "Lila!" I called, stepping into her light. She stopped mid-movement, her golden eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that rendered the weight of the world trivial. "You can't do this alone," I urged, stepping closer, but then I froze. I could see her reluctance, a flicker of defeat hidden beneath her fierce exterior. "Why did you come?" she asked, the question hanging heavy in the air, riddled with vulnerability. I could sense the battle raging within her. "Because I care, Lila," I replied, emotion strangling my words. "We've fought too hard to lose each other. I won't let you go without a fight." The tension crackled between us, weaving a fragile tether drawn taut with emotions yet unexpressed. Her breath quivered, and the music faded to silence as the weight of my declaration lingered in the air. But as my words wrapped around us, an all too familiar darkness loomed just beyond the edges of our sanctuary. The one who had sought to control her, to claim her as his own, emerged from the shadows with a chilling smirk. "You think you can save her? Such naive courage," he spat, a serpent poised to strike. "She belongs to me. Your attempts are futile." I stepped closer, my heart hammering against my ribcage. "Lila is no one's possession. You can't hold her against her will. You don't understand what you're dealing with." The undercurrents of fear, strength, and love surged within me, igniting a flurry of defiance, but doubt snaked its way back in. Suddenly, a swift movement caught my attention. Savannah, Callum, and Emma were catching up, their faces determined and fierce. Relief washed over me in a crash wave. We weren't alone. The sheer presence of our collective strength pushed back against the darkness, allowing Lila to step forward, unwavering. "Take your grasp off me," she shouted, her voice carrying strength usually reserved for the stage. The dancer before me transformed. What I saw was defiance, a flicker of hope ignited within her, and I couldn't suppress the swell of admiration that surged through me. "It's not over," she implored, her eyes reflecting an undeniable resolve. "Together, we can break free." In that moment, an unexpected twist unfolded. The man's expression faltered, confusion staining his features. "No, you don't understand," he stammered, strange, insidious doubt creeping into his eyes. It was the first crack I'd seen, a chink in his armor. The courage spilling from Lila's heart poured into all of us, filling the air with electric potential. Our energies collided, forming an irrefutable bond resonating through time. Lila was not just a dancer but a force unto herself. "He doesn't define us," I shouted, our voices merging, a cacophony of unity rising higher than the claustrophobic fears that threatened to trap us. Without a second thought, I charged toward him, fueled by determination. The world moved in slow motion. I felt, not fear, but a growing strength. This was our momentous chance, a choice we had to make together. And just as I reached him, a familiar face entered the fray. Caden, conflicted but resolute, stepped from the shadows where we thought he could hide. "Let her go," he shouted, eyes sparkling with a blend of hurt and defiance. The unexpected alliance formed before me felt surreal, a tapestry woven from pain, love, and shared misfortune. Perhaps we were more than shadows. Together, we could light the deepest darkness. The man recoiled, a mix of anger and confusion churning in his eyes. "You don't know who you're dealing with," he barked, but for the first time, I saw flickers of doubt creeping in him. "Maybe you don't know who we are," Lila called back, her voice unwavering, pouring life and conviction into her words. And as she continued to speak, the fear that had once threatened to consume our hearts flickered, revealing a path forward. The darkness began to chip away, each syllable she uttered igniting hope just as the shadows twisted around us. It was a powerful manifestation of vulnerability, interlaced with strength, and out of the depths emerged the bond that had held us together throughout all of the chaos. "Now," I shouted, and with collective resolve, we rushed forward, forming a shield around Lila, forcing back the storm that had threatened to claim her. Together we surged toward the man, united in purpose. In that moment, every heartbeat echoed with hope, and I could feel it resonating with the gentle promise of renewal. His laughter flickered with uncertainty, and the bonds of fear slipped from him. It was a beautiful moment of collision, a harmonious dance between light and dark. It seemed our combined energies could shatter his grasp, and suddenly all felt not just possible, but inevitable. "You have no power here," Caden shouted, and as our voices harmonized, he stumbled back, faced with an unstoppable force. Suddenly, the shadows that had once engulfed me retreated, the music returned, weaving through the air like a serenade of liberation. Lila, in the center of it all, became the embodiment of our shared resolve, a beacon cutting through the night. "Together," she cried, and as we joined hands, every ounce of fear dissipated into a bright burst of light, freedom flooding our veins, making our hearts soar. The man's anger flared, but it was clear our conviction had shattered the chains that had once bound him to us. As the final remnants of darkness shattered in a wash of brilliant light, I felt the space around us shift, transforming unbroken resolve into new beginnings. Lila swayed into my embrace, the warmth of her spirit grounding me as laughter burst forth, mingling with the distant music that had guided us home. Our fight was over, but our journey was just beginning. The scars of the past remained, yet the beauty of survival glimmered like stars against the vast expanse of the night sky. We would carry the memories, the pain, even the betrayal, but we wouldn't allow it to define us. Together, we stepped into a new dawn, the echo of our hearts knitting the pieces together into something beautiful and woven with love. "From this day forward," I whispered as I looked into Lila's eyes, "we dance, not just for survival, but for the courage to live our truth." And in her smile, I found an unbreakable vow, a beckoning dance of life unfolding before us, a rhythm that would remind us that even through the darkest nights, light will always find a way to shine through. So we danced, bound not just by the trials but by the profound truths unveiled, promising to meet each other within every note that called us home.